presentation entitled Social Responsibility in the Information Age with Dr. Ashta. Thank you everyone for attending today. IGI Global is very excited to introduce you to Dr. Ashta, our featured online symposium guest this month. Dr. Ashta holds the Microfinance Chair of the Burgundy School of Business in France, financed by Banque Populaire de Bourgogne-Franche-Comté. Besides finance, control, and law, he offers courses in microfinance and researches institutional aspects of microfinance and advanced technology in microfinance. He holds a BA in economics from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and a PGM-DM from IIM Calcutta, and a doctorate in law from the University of Paris too. He has taught microfinance as visiting faculty in Chicago, Pforzheim, and Brussels. Dr. Ashta has published in a number of international journals. He has recently edited a book on advanced technologies for microfinance and has guest edited 2 special editions of the Journal of Electronic Commerce in Organizations devoted to microfinance and new technologies. He has written a number of papers with microfinance focus, and at this point I will turn the webinar over to Dr. Ashta.
Hello, everybody. My name is Arvind Ashta, and I teach at the Burgundy School of Business, where I hold the Microfinance Chair, financed partially by the Banque Populaire de Bourgogne-Franche-Comté. This presentation that I'm making is a fusion between my earlier work on CSR in the Information Age of Connectivity, published in the Journal of Electronic Commerce in Organization, and my more recent interest in whether advanced technologies can enable microfinance to increase outreach and hopefully impact. The overall plan of this paper is the usual academic form: an introduction, a literature review to situate the paper, a case study, some discussion, and conclusion. The essential question I'm posing is, what kind of new social responsibilities are being created by offering MIS in a software as a service Saas environment? And is there a need for evolution of the theory? And whether the application of this to a double bottom line sector, such as microfinance, makes a difference. The overall perspective of this paper to situate this and previous research is that technological changes drive work relations, which in turn shape society and cultures. Eventually, theories change to recognize all these changes. Within this perspective, I have been looking at new information technologies and the impact they are creating on one aspect of work relations, which is networking and interdependence. Specifically, one aspect of this, which is social responsibility and CSR, and what kind of new CSR theories are required to incorporate these changes. So I now provide a brief review of the literature to situate this. First thing is, who would like to describe the information age? You could put on your chat box and I'll read out the first 5 one-liners. So maybe I'll read out the first one-liner if somebody suggests one. Okay, well, what I'll do is I'll continue, and maybe if I get some chat messages, I'll read them out later. And we'll do the same for the other questions which I may pose at some point. The information age, which I'm basing my definition on, is based on Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. It's a book I enjoyed reading. He talks about 10 forces which are changing the world. I have taken the liberty of dividing this into 5 technological forces, or 5 technologies, and 5 business relations. Thus, I would take Windows, Internet, workflow, uploading, and mobile telephones as technological forces. But I would reclassify outsourcing, offshoring, insourcing, supply chaining, and community developing as business relations which have changed owing to these technologies. And this together I would then take as the information age. And Saas I would take as part of this information age, which is in a way a technology using many of these methods and relating to many of these business relations. So cloud computing, or within its SaaS, could then be a specific application which changes the work relations between the user and the provider. All these technological changes are taking place on a global scale, and this is what globalization is all about. At the same time, thanks to globalization, we are able to make many of these business models work better. Okay. My next question, which I'd asked for some audience participation, was to define CSR. What is corporate social responsibility? But perhaps I should skip this kind of interaction and I can move on and say this is responsibility to society which we are expecting from companies. And it is this C of the SR, of the CSR, which I am questioning. The corporate-centric vision which is imposed by this definition is that the corporate is in the center of responsibilities which are usually vested with individuals, governments, global institutions, NGOs, in addition to corporations. So, in my earlier work, I had argued that corporate social responsibility unnecessarily keeps the corporation at the center of this network. The question of whether business should be invested with social responsibility at all was discussed extensively in the 60s and 70s in the US. The arguments for CSR were based on long-run self-interest, public image, the fact that business has the resources to engage in such activities, and so on. The arguments against vesting social responsibility with business were that business should focus on profit maximization. There are huge costs of getting involved in society. Business doesn't have these skills, and so on. You could read a nice paper by Davis written in 1973 for most of this debate and add to it a few arguments of Freeman and Lietka, 1991. In the end, the debate ended with vesting CSR with business. And many CSR theories came up since the 1970s. In fact, there were so many theories that now there are conceptual frameworks to map these theories. For example, Garriga and Mealy in 2004 classified them into instrumental, political, integrative, and ethical theories. In most of these views, the perspective of CSR places the firm or the corporation at the center. However, this corporate-centric view has come from attacks on two fronts within the overall field of social responsibility. Both attacks are actually based on the increased interconnectivity and networking, which you will remember is one of the major work relation impetuses we extracted from Friedman's The World is Flat. One would place the responsibility on individuals networked within the firms, while the second would place the focus of responsibility on a whole network of firms who together deliver the goods. The first view, the individual-centric, places the individual in the center instead of the firm, and it evolved from theories that suggested that the corporate social responsibilities are not just from the firm to external stakeholders, but also within the firm to all individuals, managers, and employees. Moreover, these responsibilities are individual in the sense that each employee owes these to each other. Thus, the firm itself is viewed as an internal network. In the long term, for the firm to perform, every internal as well as external stakeholder should gain. With information technology and collaborative networking, the need for large firms may disappear, and it is possible that collaborations may involve more but smaller and smaller firms, and finally the individual may be the focus of social responsibilities. This view, the individual-centric or person-centric view, emerged from theories that suggested that the corporate social responsibilities are not just from the firm to external stakeholders, but within the firm to all managers and employees. Okay, 1 second. Okay, I've just gone through this in the previous slide. So basically what Means and Schrader mentioned in the meta-capitalism was that firms become small, low capitalized, brand focused, highly flexible. So I've reduced the size of the circle of the firm to 2 instead of 4 to show these smaller firms. And what these represent is that initially we said the focus is inside the firm, and then we said they owe responsibility to external shareholders, and then we said that each of these external shareholders should gain, and then we said they're becoming smaller, and then there's a whole network of interconnected systems should take place. Of course, there were counter arguments indicating that large firms did not in fact break up into atomic firms because small scale leads to other vulnerabilities. Therefore, the large firms may remain important and social responsibilities should continue to be vested in the firm. One interesting view is the naturological view of Hill and Cassell, which indicates that firms do not like to stand out too much and would like to give way to some competitors to make sure that there are other visible preys for feeding predator NGOs. So we could say that corporations also remain important. The second stream of theories led to a network-centric vision where the firm was replaced by a group of firms or a group of partners right in the center, with individuals, governments, and global institutions and NGOs being outside. This network-centric view developed from ICT, information and communication technologies, and the systems approach. These theories, instead of concentrating on networks within the firm, viewed the firm as part of a larger network providing services. These networks allow product differentiation, and this becomes the source of competitiveness. These practices have been labeled as value-based network by Wheeler, Colbert, and Freeman in 2003, who talked about network capital within the social capital field. Thus, a kind of community building takes place which allows successful players to create interlocking networks for deals with diverse partners, as shown by Stormer. For example, the telematics in your car may need diverse partners such as IBM, Hewlett-Packard, eBay, and Cisco. Within these network operators, there is mutual dependence and therefore a responsibility expected of each other. The key word in these networks is connectivity. Collaborative forms replace hierarchies complicated by globalization and the changing cost structure. This means the external stakeholders outside the firm become more important than internal stakeholders within the firm, which reduces in size. Key issues are therefore trust and profit sharing. For trust, new intellectual protection is required. For profit sharing and cost sharing, the relationships between the consuming and producing organizations, as well as between the producers inter se and the consumers inter se, need to be examined. To ensure trust, problems of asymmetric information need to be overcome, and this requires sharing of information with each other. The sharing of this information is facilitated by the information age. This can be summarized in this slide that information age includes connectivity, which is creating multiple interdependent stakeholders. This interdependence creates trust issues, requiring new control measures, new performance indicators, and new information needs and new information sharing. This information gathering is facilitated by the information age. However, the access to information creates new problems on who provides the technology and who has access to the information available and what use is made of it. Some issues or examples related to information sharing technology. One problem is that if information is provided by the network, who owns the information and how it can be used? For example, can Facebook ethically sell user information? Recently, a German minister resigned based on publicly available information trail on Facebook on his private actions. The network operators also owe responsibilities to operators outside the network. Information can be used for good and for evil. The recent riots in London is an example of how technology and hyperconnectivity could create instant writing. Thus, protection is required from terrorist attacks, speculative attacks, virus attacks. Protection is also required from environmental hazards which satellite signals may cause on brains of animals such as whales. The question which is posed is, who in the network is responsible? Which firm? Who in the network will be sued if he or she does not meet their responsibilities? Another problem with the network-centric view of responsibilities is that the network itself creates more complications to understand the mission and desires of each person. So where are we going? Here I take an example from marketing. There are many new marketing techniques which have come out in the information age, like database marketing, e-marketing, interaction marketing, network marketing. The first two are one-to-many. The third one is one-to-one. And the last one is a network to one or many. Basically, the network replaces the firm. In our model, the first two remain corporate-centric, the third one becomes individual-centric, and the last one network-centric. Thus, we could conclude in our previous research that the CSR concept, instead of putting the firm at the center, could move either to a network-centric approach or to an individual-centric approach. We now look at one case study, which is a Saas for microfinance. In the rest of this paper, I will examine only one information technology, which is software as a service, and embed it in one social bottom line sector, microfinance, which has not been studied by many CSR researchers. Based on this, we will see whether the social responsibility theories can evolve in the network's responsibility direction. I start by presenting Saas for microfinance. Who would like to define microfinance? Okay, as earlier, I won't wait for chat responses, and I'll make the presentation of microfinance myself. For those who are not familiar with the sector, microfinance is the provision of financial services to the poor or the financially excluded, who are often also socially excluded. The financial services which we are talking about are microcredit, micro-savings, micro-remittances, micro-insurance, micro-payments by the government. To give you an idea of the size of transactions, a microcredit loan may be $30. Although the average loan size in India and Bangladesh, two of the biggest markets, is about $100 to $150. Average loan sizes are much larger in Africa, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. In developed countries, the line between microloans and SME loans is blurred. For example, the European Union considers any loan of less than 25,000 euros to be a microloan. Nevertheless, in practice, in France, for example, microloans may usually be in the 2,000 to 5,000 euro range. These loans are provided by microfinance institutions, which I will call MFIs, who invariably are judged on a double bottom line. On the one hand, they have a social mission, part of their corporate social responsibility, survey 2011, to improve lives, often measured by scale or outreach because quantifying impact is difficult. On the other hand, they need to be financially autonomous, which again requires scale. Because small loan transactions involve relatively high processing costs. Today, there are over 10,000 MFIs, of which 700, this needs correction, 700 are autonomous, 2,000 would be medium, and approximately 7,000 would be small. While many firms would now like to provide services to the big MFIs, the service needs of the long tail of small MFIs are largely unmet. So this is typically how the long tail is illustrated. So you have some very large MFIs, and many people want to provide services to them. They're employing thousands of employees. These are the medium-sized MFIs who may have some service providers. And these are the very small MFIs, who would have less than 10,000 customers, and not many people want to service them. Scaling an MFI so important to meet both its objectives, the financial and the social, requires replicating a business model. This requires standardization. And so we can understand the importance of information systems to achieve scale. However, the employees of MFI are often taken from their clients, therefore illiterate for computers. Thus, they have a need for high attention and handholding, but have little ability to pay. As opposed to this, software providers would like to sell their products at high prices and provide minimal services. This creates a gap, which is gradually being filled in today by SaaS providers like Microplanet. Of course, Microplanet is not the only one. Today we have a number of them, including Fino, which is a banking network, IBM, Mambu, who's working with RiskBiz, MFI Force, which is using Salesforce.com, Microplanet, which is exclusively microfinance, MeForce, which is Green Foundation based, Mosfit, which is using the network of Intel Caps work on poverty, and so on. Some of these have been reviewed in Ashta and Patel in 2010, and we'll probably be adding some more to this list and adding more to that paper, which is available on ssr1.com. So what is SaaS, software as a service? Okay. Again, I'll continue. I provide a very brief explanation of what SaaS is. It is the application software part of cloud computing, where the software is housed on a remote server and users can access this software and share it based on a usage fee or rental. Thus, one SaaS operator serves many users with a multi-tenant architecture to ensure that users cannot access each other's information. The software is housed, maintained, and updated by the centralized SaaS operator, and end users can therefore focus on their core business. Often, the software is part of a group of softwares permitting users different modules to service their overall needs. The two key features which we can note is that there is a multiplicity of competing clients on the downside of the supply chain and a multiplicity of complementary suppliers of the upside of the supply chain. There are various technical issues which I won't really go into since I'm not an expert. Questions like open source or propriety. Should the SaaS operator make or buy its software? So Mambu might be providing its own. Others may be buying it from somebody else. What kind of multi-tenant architecture to construct? What happens in developing countries where there's no continuous connectivity? Should MFI need a second backup server, or should the backup be on the desktop, and so on? Okay, where is all this heading? Where are we going? I just bring back the original perspective and say that software as a service is just one information technology. The particular problem that creates network and interdependence which we are looking is that it gives complementary product offer services to competing customers, creating new responsibilities to customers, and this is what this paper is about. And in microfinance, these customers are having a double bottom line, which means that prices have to be very low to ensure sustainability of customers. Some issues related to SaaS. The competitiveness of the SaaS depends on the competitiveness of all the service partners, the software providers, but also the hardware providers who are behind them in the supply chain. These suppliers are in collaborative relationships and not in hierarchy. On the customer side, the MFI has a number of trust issues that the SaaS operator needs to address. The MFIs do not know the software, nor can they trust that the one they are locked in, that the software will be updated. This holder problem also extends to pricing stability. The MFIs also have confidentiality issues with other customers using the software, especially if the software was developed by a leading MFI in their country. Will the large customers be able to buy the information of the small customers? At the same time, competing customers of the SaaS need each other to be able to obtain the benefit of the SaaS. Each small MFI is competing for borrowers but may be using the same SaaS in order to remain competitive. Inefficiencies introduced for the SaaS by any one customer need to be payrolled by other customers. Just to focus on one issue and the problem it creates, let's just look at updates. One of the social responsibilities of the SaaS operator is to perpetually innovate and update. But how can it force its software suppliers and hardware suppliers to do this? What happens if the software provider goes out of business? Which means, is he earning enough money from this SaaS operator as well as all other direct sales he may be doing to remain in business? On the downstream side, one question is how to price innovations and share the receipts. The question is how to build the different large and small users for the improvements, not just for the basic software. Therefore, we can say that the SaaS operator needs to arbiter the sharing of profits and gains. On the one hand, between the group of competing customers and the group of complementary suppliers, and on the other hand, between the competing customers inter se, that is the big and small customers, and between the complementary suppliers inter se. Therefore, through its pricing policy and its sourcing policy, it has the responsibility to ensure that the long tail of customers survive and that its suppliers remain competitive. There is an inbuilt incentive in the rental per usage model. The growth of the customers, that means the growth of the MFI, leads to growth for the SaaS operator as well. Thus, the incentives of the two organizations, the SaaS and the MFIs, are aligned. A good SaaS would therefore be configurable to allow the maximum customization of process to suit the MFI. See Pushpadhar Das's chapter on MeForce in my edited book on advanced technologies for microfinance, published by IGI Global in 2011. In our SaaS for microfinance example, the final SaaS pricing may determine the relationship between the SaaS operator and the MFIs. However, large MFI customers may demand bigger discounts, forcing smaller MFI's customer to pay more to make the annual revenue sustainable for the SaaS operator. Similarly, the SaaS operator then has to share this revenue between the producers, which could be the cloud computing servers, the software package manufacturers, the satellite operators, and so on. On this side, the usage rental model does not ensure that suppliers of the hardware and the software maximize returns. But Demir Khan et al. 2010 do find ways to solve this coordination problem between the two under certain conditions. We now need to discuss how the Saas in microfinance case can relate to my earlier theoretical work on evolution towards person-centric and network-centric responsibilities. One attempt at joining the two views could be considered in terms of Prahlad and Ramaswamy's co-creation of value. Here, the networks are adding value to other networks or to individual customers by creating unique experiences for customers or groups of customers. In a sense, each consumer is now able to interact with the network to take from it a bundle of goods and services which reflect his or her individual desires. The focus shifts to the consumer. In our case, the consumer would be the MFI who would take from the Saas the appropriate software modules that it needs for its business model. Moreover, in asking the Saas operator to fix bugs, it would improve the network for all the customers. In this Prahlad and Ramaswamy model, Demirkin et al. Have indicated problems of coordination and problems of co-creation. We add problems of trust and abandonment and problems of co-consumption. Our SaaS for microfinance operator needs to answer questions on how the network of software and infrastructure as a service, this infrastructure and this is the software, could distribute the profits across the supply chain and the value chain. For the microfinance operator, the SaaS network is part of its value chain. For the SaaS network, its own value chain includes the AIS and application service providers and the community of individual MFIs who use the software. Each operator is facing problems such as coordination problems, congestions, holdups. Within the network, there is also a problem of trust and abandonment. At what time does the SaaS operator move to a cheaper cloud or a better software? At the same time, there are problems of co-creation and different value added to each consumer. The question is how to disaggregate tasks and price them differently based on different value added to each consumer. So it's a question of disaggregating tasks and allocating expenses between different MFIs. If this Prahlad and Ramaswamy view is considered to best describe our case, and if this view is consumer-centric, the network of firms would just replace the individual firm. But if there is real co-creation, that means the consumer is adding to his own value, that consumer should be part of the network here. If he is here, then who is here? Who is at the center? One way out would be to put the poor person at the center. However, If the poor person is co-creating value along with the MFI who's serving him, as suggested in Ashta 2011, the question would return as to whether he was part of the network or the focus. But for the moment, we can say that could be the poor person. If we expand this vision to take concrete examples and we replace this individual by the technology and put this individual as an equal outside, we get the social responsibility of different actors. The individuals could be MFI agents or programmers, corporations could be MFIs or software manufacturers, the global institutions could be CGAP technology reviews, the NGOs could be IntelCap, the government could be telecom authorities, and so on. Saas creates a new networks, but also causes changes in the nature of social responsibilities of individuals, corporates, governments, NGOs, and global institutions. The individuals need to educate themselves to keep their jobs. This is part of their social responsibility. For example, MFI field agents need to open their minds to using this technology, as well as help their colleagues understand how to use these technologies. The software engineers need to develop Saas which reduce not only paperwork but also emails and Excel attachments. The corporates need to ensure their sustainability, and this may require outsourcing their software needs, which are not part of their core business. The Saas operator itself should then have a commitment to its members, including these MFIs, to innovate regularly so that they, the MFIs, remain ahead of competition and they're lowering MFI costs and costs to the poor. The governments may have the responsibility to provide the cloud infrastructure to make all this happen, as well as regulate to provide laws to ensure privacy of information. NGOs may be one source of developing Saas operators. For example, IntelCap houses most of it. Finally, global institutions such as CGAP can, through their technology reviews, help MFIs choose appropriate Saas manufacturers and programs for its needs. What this diagram shows is that the focus is on the poor. That means we should shift the focus from the source, which is the firm, to the object. A kind of a teleological view of social responsibilities. As our discussion illustrates, all the actors in our Saas for microfinance case are getting together to help the poor. This view may be influenced because we have chosen a double bottom line sector for this study, a sector not frequently studied by CSR researchers. The concept of CSR to the poor, or just social responsibility to the poor, takes on a new meaning, enabling business to compete to serve the long tail of MFIs to serve the poor. The responsibility becomes that of the entire network, including governments and NGOs and so on. The responsibilities of the network actors to each other as well as to the poor by reducing the cost of credit to him. To put this in perspective, if 1 billion people are living on less than $1.25 a day, another 3 billion are living on less than $2.50 a day, to who do we owe responsibilities? Are these poor people in the information age? Whose responsibility are these poor people? That of the MFI who wants to serve them? That of the Saas operator who wants to service these MFIs? That of the government who wants to provide the infrastructure? Or that of the NGOs who want to leverage their knowledge to permit these operators to succeed? Let me conclude on what we have seen today. We have seen that Saas technology and networking adds social responsibilities within the network to those external responsibilities which are formally being discharged by the firm. Each firm's responsibilities remain for its own survival, but the partnerships envisaged for adding value are creating new responsibilities. The case study indicates that a number of problems are created by addition of such responsibilities, such as pricing, updating, sharing, trust, privacy, and so on. For the network-centric view to prevail, controlling stakeholders in a dual sense of the stakeholders controlling each other requires performance measures, which in turn requires information, for example, on usage and billing. All this information is centralized in the Saas network, which creates asymmetric power for all the other stakeholders. However, if the Saas operator shares the information, it creates privacy problems. We also see that surprisingly, for a network technology such as Saas, the individual-centric view is perhaps best adapted. Except that co-creation element makes us wonder whether the MFI is the individual consumer or part of the network. One way out is to place the final consumer of the MFI, the poor, in the center of the network. Thus, it is not the consumer of the Saas, but the ultimate consumer of the MFI who is at the focus of social responsibilities. We have seen that networked operators such as Saas add a new dimension of social responsibility between the actors who are combining with each other. We also see that the co-creation, which is evident in the use of these services, adds value as well as risks and responsibilities of the software provider, who becomes the information depository. We have also seen that the social responsibility inherent in the microfinance sector, as well as its needs for sustainability, require the Saas operator to be aware of the low pricing required for these small operators to succeed, especially if these small operators are considered to have higher impact. This may impose constraints on it not to offer too large discounts to large customers at the expense of the long tail of small customers. Finally, we have seen that governments, NGOs, global business, and the networks, along with firms, MFIs in our case, are coming together in a larger relationship to focus on poverty alleviation. Thus, in the network, perhaps the focus of social responsibility needs to be teleological. This case study has covered social responsibility to the poor. Other cases may be social responsibility to the environment. Other future research with globalization could be based on cases like the Arab Spring as well as the recent riots in UK on hyperconnectivity. The question this paper is posing is whether the focus needs to shift from those responsibility to one to who these responsibilities are owed. For this future theoretical work needs to be focused on topics such as social responsibilities to the poor, the information age, then empowerment it has created through hyperconnectivity is making it evident that if their problems are not solved, the poor could create problems for those who shirk their responsibilities. I have provided you a bibliography of a short bibliography of the basic articles I've cited, and I thank you, and I'll take any questions now.
Maria, you seem to have a question. Can you type your question into the chat box for us?
Mas spesificaria fez uma conferência. Ok. Hello, I don't see the question.
While Maria is typing that into the chat box, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about IGI Global. Thank you, Dr. Ashta, for joining us. We really appreciate you joining us. I'd like to take a moment and tell you about a little bit of IGI Global. We publish the latest research in information, computer science, and technology as applied to business and public administration, engineering, education, medical health care, and social science through our books, journals, cases, and databases. If you enjoyed Dr. Ashta's presentation today, you can purchase his research through our website at www.igiglobal.com. Another great way to access Dr. Ashta's research is through our InfoSci Books database, which contains over 1,600 book and reference publications. Also, we have InfoSci Journals database, which contains Dr. Ashta's research articles and thousands others from over 130 journal publications. Finally, you can also purchase the research through our InfoSci On Demand pay-per-view ordering service. If you visit our website, you can order individual chapters from Dr. Ashta's books, as well as many other research IGI Global has published. All of our book chapters and journal articles are available in our InfoSci On Demand database, which is a great option for teachers, students, and researchers who need immediate access to individual articles. Maria, I still don't see your question. Perhaps you can email us, or I can have Dr. Ashta email you with your question. Oh, Antonio, I see your hand raised. Oh, no? All right, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to email us here at eresources@igiglobal.com. We'll pass questions on to Dr. Ashta if you have any questions for him or for us.